Well, g'day. You can see I've changed roles and I've brought the lovely Kate Bain in to dress up the video. And sick of looking at my ugly face. We're going to talk about Catholicism. Now, that is a huge subject because we've got 2,000 years of church history to sort of cover there. We're not going to even try to cover all the various types of Catholic Church that are out there. We thought it'd be better to concentrate, Kate, on the Australian Catholic Church that probably the students here are going to meet, and perhaps part of your experience of the Catholic Church. Now, I grew up in a Protestant church, and we had all sorts of ideas about what Catholicism added up to: ritual, Mary, the remoteness of Jesus, the priest sort of had playing a central role, and there was lots of fears and perhaps misinformation. Maybe some of it was justified, and so on. So I think it would be good at least to try and give the students some sort of handle on when they go to a Catholic church, and I hope they do turn up and experience it. But say, well, what is there that, obviously in those 2,000 years, the Catholic Church can't have been all wrong. Like there must have been lots. I mean, for a long time it was the only church there was. There wasn't a Protestant church, it was just the Catholic Church. So, and we still look to a lot of their great teachers and figures as important in our spiritual growth. So where would a student begin? How would we understand what the Catholic tradition has to offer in terms of spiritual growth or their own spiritual life, and what things might they look out for that are sort of dangerous, perhaps?
Okay. Well, one of the key things growing up as a Catholic was that I was being taught about who I was in God's family, and I think that's the main thing, that what they call the sacraments, which are different rituals that you take part in as you grow up through life. So baptism, and then, which I don't remember my baptism when I was a little baby, and then there's things like confessional, which is actually called reconciliation, but a lot of Protestants call it confession, and reconciliation, First Holy Communion, confirmation, different ones like that, marriage, holy orders, last rites. Those sacraments, we were taught about what they were, and by as we took part in the different sacraments, we were invited to become more part of God's family. It was like we were being welcomed into God's family, and God's family was very much the church, and very much the Catholic Church. To a large extent, the Protestant Church was just irrelevant to me. I didn't know Protestants until I met them as a teenager, and then when I met them, I was just, as far as I could tell, they were just like any other person. I'd never heard anything negative about them, but I just became interested.
But it still could be true, couldn't it, for a lot of Catholics, those sacraments, if you're confirmed and christened and all those things and get the last rites, then you can be sure of, for some, that's how you become a Christian. That's
what being a Christian is. That's certainly the case. Like taking part in those different rituals is what shows the world who you are and what teaches you who you are. So,
but like any ritual, and the same thing can happen in Protestant churches, go on to communion or whatever, it can replace real faith.
That's right, a ritual can take the place of real faith. So it's that whole idea of what's your identity as you're growing up and learning who you are. Do you learn that, I am a human being who does these rituals of faith but doesn't pay any attention to my personal life of faith? Or do you grow up learning, I do these rituals of faith and I have a vibrant personal devotional life, and I'm reaching out to others and that sort of thing. And I think that that's probably one of the dangers in the Catholic Church growing up, and one of the reasons why less people attend church nowadays than used to, because it used to be a powerful cultural, social force. You had to go to church. You had to attend, or else the priest would be mad at you and all the other...
It's a threat.
Yeah, that's right. Whereas nowadays, that's kind of like by the by a little bit. Maybe it's hanging over a little bit more.
The church has lost some of its power, perhaps.
Definitely.
Now, for a Protestant looking in, like as I said to you earlier, well, sometimes it seemed to me that all that apparatus that grew up, for one reason or another, like priests and altars and the saints and Mary and so on, it seemed like Jesus became a very remote figure for a lot of Catholics. Like you had to go through all these various processes to get to him, and he didn't seem to figure it all very much. Like he was on the wall, but as a living figure, he didn't appear to be very present.
Yeah, well, Well, it's interesting. Like, I mean, certainly you want to check out what the history of the Catholic Church is, but my experience is nothing like that. My experience had Jesus at the very centre, and he was the central figure of my devotion, and my prayer was generally to him. I would pray the Hail Mary every now and then, but I wasn't really thinking about, like, it was more just a discipline, I guess. When my devotional life was to him, and when I'd enter...
Would you pray it now?
The Hail Mary? In certain circumstances, special circumstances, but I wouldn't certainly as a general thing, and I haven't for probably about, I don't know, I've maybe prayed it once in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
But
So out of all that, like, if you were talking to these young people as you are, like, what would be, perhaps, I mean, the Catholic Church is marked by a lot of ritual, has been certainly in some cases hyper-ritual, like if you go to the Vatican, to see the services on television are massive and ornate and everything, and that can be a bit disconcerting for modern young people.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, World Youth Day, you know, hundreds of thousands of kids turned up.
Pope's our celebrity.
Yeah.
Our celebrity kind of God-man.
What are we to make of it? Like, is there anything for, say, a modern-day young Christian trying to find his way to follow Jesus truly? I mean, what can he draw from that? How will he approach it?
Well, I would say that the same truth that anyone experiences, which is that when the gospel's proclaimed, there's a power in it. And that happened to me at age 5 years old, when a nun in the Catholic Church, when a nun, I heard the story of what Jesus did on the cross at the knees of a nun, and I remember responding. I couldn't tell you exactly what I thought, but I just remember knowing this was important. And from that point on, I was always interested in him and always wanted to find out more. And I believe that's the power of the Holy Spirit and the gospel proclaimed. And then those rituals that I took part in growing up, as I sought to learn more and I internalised it and became real for me, those rituals really shaped who I was as a daughter of God and as a member of God's family. And I feel like those aspects of faith and just how you live it out have been really useful to me. So I would say, as a young person, or any person who wanted to pursue an interest in Catholicism, those would be the things that I'd be saying concentrate on. Concentrate on getting the benefit out of how your devotional life is internalised and becomes real for you. Because I used to walk into Mass, and sometimes I'd tune out to what the priest was saying, but I would look at the crucifix and I would pray to Jesus, and my imagination would bring him alive. Not there on the crucifix, but would bring him alive to me, and I knew he loved me.
I want to ask you, is this typical for a lot of Catholics?
Oh, I knew many Catholic, I had many Catholic friends who had a vibrant, alive faith, the same as I did. I mean...
So how would the young people listening to this, how would they... What sort of guidelines could they use to... Like I've said about other denominations, what would they use to check? If you think of the compass diagram, law, reason, mystery and experience, how would they check, well, this is not so useful, or that's perhaps wrong? You know, because I think every denomination's probably got some heresies in it somewhere.
Yeah. I think, if anything, my experience of Catholicism today is that it can be a bit wishy-washy. I don't mean that as a criticism. I mean, it probably reflects my Protestant perspective now, with all of the influence I've had from Protestantism. But there's a sense in which modern Catholicism reminds me of Buddhism, where it's very syncretistic. It fits well with other beliefs and absorbs other beliefs. And I mean, sometimes they can be very useful.
So in our notes we said that's why there are all those little orders and things, because the Catholic Church has tended not to just to adapt them. So you want to give you a jersey as the Jesuits or the
which is the model that the apostles used in Acts, like particularly Paul. But I guess it's that whole thing. Paul says you have to test, or is it Paul or John who says you have to test and find out what is in line with the gospel and with Jesus' message and his life and teachings. Those things, that's what I would say with Catholicism and with any of these experiences that you're seeking to find out about.